It's been a long time, hasn't it?
Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
I want you to know that I was supposed to be on vocal rest now, okay? But here I am, making this video for you. This eyeshadow looks so fucking patchy. I'm trying something new, okay? Leave me alone. Because it's been a long time since I last filmed a video and uploaded a video for you, I thought the best way to get back here would be to talk about some recent reads. And by recent, I mean I read them like a month or two ago. Basically, this is a wrap-up of the first 2 months of this year. But it also might work as a recommendations video because I honestly started my reading year off with the right foot, like 100%. I haven't had a bad, like actually bad read at all so far. I mean, so far in the last 2 months. Today I'm going to talk to you about the 6 books that I read during January and February. Still have a hard time saying that word, my god. Of course, I decided to start the year off with something that I could almost guarantee would be a good read for me, and for that I chose Untamed Shore by the great Silvia Moreno Garcia, because I love this woman. Like, what can I say? I would read her grocery list. I would read her grocery list. Grocery? No, grocery. That's how you say it, right?
Grocery list.
This is the story of Viridiana, a young woman who lives in the town of Desengaño in 1970s Mexico. There she lives a very calm and quaint and boring life, and is crushed by the weight of everyone's expectations for her. Like getting married to a loco, just getting in a good marriage in general, having lots of babies, inheriting her mother's store and working it, and so on. But she wants something different for herself, and she dreams of places like Hollywood and Paris and other such quote-unquote fancy places. She's quite naive and romantic, and she's really obsessed with Hollywood films of the time and of a bit earlier times, like the 50s and 60s, and the Hollywood stars too. And there's a lot of talk about that in the book too, about the films that she likes and where she watched them and how they made her feel and how they kind of build this very naive idea of the world inside her head. Then one day, a group of rich gringos get into the town and they hire her as a kind of guide slash secretary of sorts, which brings some much needed excitement into her life, and money. It brings some much needed money into her life too, because my girl wants out of there. And she's immediately drawn to them, of course, to the glamour of their lives and to the exhilaration that comes from them. But then one of them dies, and Viridiana finds herself lying to protect her new friends.
Liar!
And the plot basically goes from there in this web of lies and deceit and suspense, with lots of questions about the day being asked, and lots of questions that Viridiana herself has about the fucking gringos. Always the fucking gringos, my god. I really like this book a lot. The setting feels so real and lived in, if that makes sense. It's a seaside town in Mexico where fishing is the main industry, I think would be the right word. And they do lots of shark fishing too, despite the fact that it hasn't been as profitable as before in ages. So you have this beach with lots of shark carcasses, which is like the major tourist point in the town. And that's another good point too. The tourism there has been steadily declining for ages, to the point where at the start of the book it's basically non-existent. So the arrival of these foreigners there is a big deal because it's a good opportunity for everyone there to swindle them and make some money, which honestly, reparations. The people of the town and the relationships and the social circles, the social conventions and norms and the things that they do day to day, everything feels so realistic, and so is the town itself. As I said before, it feels very lived in. It's like someone is just describing something they are actually seeing in real time, and it felt very realistic. But one thing that really fascinated me about this book was how slow it was, which sounds like a bad thing, but in this case it really wasn't. It just has this very peculiar feel to it, because for a good third of the book nothing much happens, but I still feel like all of that was really necessary and you couldn't do away with that third, because it really helps to build the plot and the characters mostly, as well as like the tension, the suspense. The pacing is slow and steady and kind of meandering, and it works so well for the story. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that the book mixes these two genres. It mixes this more noir, suspenseful, mysterious thing with this other kind of coming of age story at the same time. It's not this fast-paced, biting your nails kind of thing. It's not a thriller, it's a noir. Those are two different things, and I think it's very important for you to know that going in so that you can adjust your expectations accordingly. Now, I, as a lover of film noir, really fucking love this. I loved how it explored the way people easily took advantage of Meridiana and how she slowly began to see through it, and then eventually even turned to doing that herself in self-preservation. Her evolution as a character was quite subtle, but so well done. But yeah, the commentary on that and how easily foreigners can and do exploit people in the global south and their communities. So lots of commentary, sometimes subtle and sometimes not so much, on racism and imperialism and misogyny. The prose was fantastic, as per usual with Miss Sylvia. I also loved the ending of the book. I think it just fit the story very well, and its openness worked so well with the story and the themes and that noir vibe, you know. It just made sense. Not every question is answered and not every single story actually ends, and I just love it for that. Now, was it perfect? No, but it was damn good, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next we have The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. This book was blurbed as Rebecca meets Mexican Gothic, and that's truly a perfect description of it. I feel like this book took all of the things that worked in those two other works, all of the best things about each of them, and gave them its own spin, and dare I say, made them even better. This takes place in Mexico after the Mexican War of Independence, and we follow Beatriz. Her father was a general who was executed during the overthrow of the Mexican government of the time, and their house got burned down, and Beatriz and her mother escaped with barely anything left and had to live with some very unsavory family members. Let's put it that way. These are distant relatives from her mother's side, the side that famously disowned her for marrying, I can't remember if he was indigenous or mestizo, but a non-white man, basically. So it's safe to say that Beatriz, who was the fruit of that relationship, was not treated very well by these people. So when Don Rodolfo Solórzano proposes, Beatriz is more than happy to get married to him immediately, despite the fact that his last wife died under very mysterious and unknown circumstances. Because she thinks that by marrying him, she will get her freedom. You know, she'll get to get away from her racist family members who treat her as a maid, treat her like shit because her skin is darker than theirs. And she also gets Hacienda San Isidro, an estate in the countryside that she will get to make her own home. The book starts with her arrival there, and she very quickly notices that the Hacienda is not what she expected it to be. Like, it is down, okay? It's down. It's old and moldy and just not very pretty. But she's very positive. She tries to make the best out of the situation because at the end of the day, it's still a house, big house, and she really tries to kind of bring some life to the place, you know, and to make it better and to kind of renovate it. Not only because she wants a home of her own, but also because she wants to bring her mother over to live with her. Soon after, her husband leaves, and Beatriz starts having weird experiences, like weird shit starts happening almost immediately. She hears voices, she has hallucinations, she has weird feelings, feels like she's being observed, and she can barely sleep. It's a shit show. Her sister-in-law doesn't really seem to care about the whole thing. She doesn't even seem to notice it, and she doesn't appear to believe what Beatriz is saying. But the bitch also doesn't set foot inside the house at night, ever. And she makes a point of that, so things are suspicious. But it gets to a point where it's just too much for Beatriz, and she makes the decision to get a priest to kind of like exorcise the house, to bless the house. She thinks there's some kind of curse or just evil spirit there, or something of the sort, despite the fact that she's not really a very religious person. And that's how we meet our second POV character, Padre Andres. He's a young mestizo priest who also happens to kind of be a witch of sorts, which, you know, very hard position to be in, to be mestizo period in Mexico, to be a mestizo priest, even harder, to be a mestizo priest who is also kind of a witch and has to hide it because Inquisition was a thing, and using the Catholic Church, you know, and priesthood to kind of hide yourself. So difficult, it's damn near impossible, I would say. I'm not saying that as a criticism of the book though. I think it's quite amazing the way it's worked in the story. But yeah, a very hard position for him to be in, definitely. I adored this book. It immediately became one of my favorite books of all time. Like that. It's a gothic horror historical novel with great commentary on colonialism and race, class, but also the very nasty history of the Catholic Church, in this case, specifically Mexico. The corruption and the nastiness and the racism, the things that the Catholic Church did to the indigenous people of Mexico. I personally thought it was explored incredibly well and incredibly thoroughly, but take my opinion with a grain of salt. I'm not indigenous, so, you know. The way this book explored faith and belief, and even syncretism to some extent, was just incredible, and it touched me very deeply. The atmosphere is flawless, the horror is so well done, the house is a character in and of itself, which is something that I love, and it gets surprisingly gory and creepy at times. Like, it's a lot. I listened to it on audio, which I highly recommend because both narrators are just incredible. And they are Victoria Villarreal and Lee Osorio. Great work, guys. Amazing. Much like the first book I talked about, I found the setting in this one to be flawless too. The village, the city, the people, the hacienda in and of itself, all of them felt very real and lived in. All of the characters were fantastically written too, and there's also a beautiful romance between Beatriz and Padre Andrés. It builds steadily throughout the novel, and I shipped it so much and so hard. My God, 15-year-old me would have a heart attack at the thought of me enjoying a priest romance. Oh, how the tables have turned. The writing, you know, the prose, beautiful, gorgeous. And this book did something I wish every historical did, which is to actually explore the period in time in that specific place and in that specific context. And it did so in such a way that I felt the urge to keep researching after I was done with it. And even while reading it, I just researched everything I could find at the time about that period and specific things that the book mentioned. And I don't mean that in a, oh, the book itself, the book alone didn't make sense kind of way. I mean it in a, oh my God, I need to know which parts of this are true and based in a real history, which ones were made up, which of these people are real, and everything that happened, I need to learn more way, which I just think is amazing in the mark of a great historical fiction. As I read it, I recognize certain events, you know, from stuff I learned in school, for example, or just I recognize certain names, like I knew of those people, but there were also events here and details here that I knew nothing about. Maybe that's just because I'm stupid, you know. I was actually a very good history student, but my memory shied and I just kind of forgot most of the stuff that I learned throughout my life. I honestly can't think of a single flaw in this book. I'm not even joking. Like 5 out of 5 stars without a second thought. It's just fantastic. I actually plan on rereading it as soon as possible. And who knows, maybe I'll do an exclusive video about it where I go more in depth about lots of things. I've been meaning to actually explore the more video essay format, but I'm stupid, I think. I'm not very good at writing essays. If anyone has any tips and tricks, please send them my way, but don't hold me to that. It's just an idea, okay? I have nothing concrete yet, or ever, who knows. Okay, I think those two were the books that I had the most to talk about, and those two were the ones that I had a lot to talk about. So, you know, hopefully I can get the other 4 down with half as much time as I spent on these first 2. And hopefully I can get this video under, I don't know, 30 minutes. As if. The third book I read was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Now this is a second chance romance between Eva and Shane. The two of them met years ago when they were teenagers and spent one very intense and drug-fueled week together. Both of them came from abusive or neglectful homes, and they found an escape from the circumstances in each other very fast. It also got codependent and unhealthy and destructive very fast too. And to say that it ended in heartbreak would be generous, a generous assessment of what happens. Years later, both of them are now successful authors. Eva writes erotic, paranormal, romance, and Shane writes like literary fiction types of things. And the two of them can very clearly see that the author is low-key writing about them or to them. Mind you, it's been like, what, 15 years? And the two of them are still constantly thinking about each other to the point where they are writing to and about each other in the books. Like, also Eva is now a mother and Shane is now clean, he's sober, and he's mentoring underprivileged kids. And the two of them end up meeting again in a chance encounter during a kind of literary panel with Black authors. And they end up spending another 7 days together, which is what we mostly read about in the book. I quite like this book. I loved the past history and I loved how it clearly impacted their current relationship to, because the entire time they want to get together, they're also wondering if that would be wise to do, you know, considering just how codependent and destructive and unhealthy you got the first time around. And they also have to wonder, was that crazy love that we felt for each other 15 years ago real at all? Or was it just a drugs token? Like... I will respect myself, I will educate me. And beyond that, the two of them also have baggage that doesn't involve the relationship. Like Eva has very debilitating chronic migraines that impact every single aspect of her life, and she's dealt with that pain for most of her life too. There's also her past relationship and past marriage with the father of her daughter, you know, how it impacted her and the things that it made her feel, and how it impacts the woman that she is presently, and how she sees relationships in general. And Shane has his addiction and his jail time. And of course, both of them have their childhood trauma and the subsequent issues that they developed as almost coping mechanisms, you know, in order to cope with all of that. These are people who think that it's hard for someone to love them. They think they are too hard to be loved. And not coincidentally, these are also people who had very little love given to them throughout their lives. But I really liked that at the end of the day, the message in the book is unquestionably that regardless of all of the baggage and the flaws and the trauma, they deserve love, and they can be loved, and they can love. And I think that's beautiful. I did have some cons about this book though, I'm not gonna lie. Some of them are more due to my own expectations and my preferences. Like, I am not a fan of pop culture references, for example. That's a preference. And I thought, by the cover alone and by the way people recommended this book, the way they talked about it, that I would get a more literary romance type of deal. That's an expectation. Neither of these things are necessarily a flaw of the book in and of itself. These are just problems that I personally had with it, you know. But one thing that I genuinely didn't like about the book was just how fast-paced and just choppy the ending was, especially when you consider where we were left at that point in the story and the things that were going on. Like, it makes no sense to me, honestly. But in the end, I still really liked this book and I had a great time, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, I lied, because I have a lot to say about this book too. Or at least I have lots of thoughts and feelings. Am I going to be able to put them into words properly though? Stay tuned to find out. Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. My God. This book tells the story of fictional singer Daisy Jones and fictional band The Six and their extremely successful collaboration. Their album made numbers, they toured coast to coast, they were at the top of the world until abruptly they split in the middle of the tour. And nobody knows why. The book is written in interview style, as if it's like a transcript of several interviews with the band members, as well as people who knew and worked with them. So the friends, family, managers, biographers, etc. And what these interviews seek to do is to get a full story, or as close to a full story, of the band, of Daisy, of the relationships and the tours and all of that. But most importantly, to find out the thing that nobody knows, which is what the fuck happened? Why did y'all split? Like, what? And I was in it from literally page 1, bitch. Like, immediately. When the fictional author of this book that we're reading, the one who interviewed everyone, starts the entire thing with an author's note that basically says, take everyone's story with a grain of salt. Oh, bitch, sign me the fuck up. I love an unreliable narrator, and this is basically a convention of those. Like, everyone is unreliable. At least until we prove the opposite. Because that note it's just so true. Like, there are things that you could check. This is these people's version of what happened, their version of the truth. Though there are things you could fact check and corroborate and things that were publicized, other things happened with like two of the people and no one else to witness it. Some other things were just not publicized or shared with anyone else. So like, you only have these people's words to take for it. And lots of times they are not saying the same thing. The math isn't mathin'. I love that. I find it extremely fascinating. Taylor Jenkins Reid just captures the 1970s spirit and music scene so well, especially, you know, the 70s, especially the 70s rock and roll music scene in the US, as well as just the experience of being in a band and just how messy it can get. That is so real. Like any type of work that you have to do with a lot of people together and a lot of input, and just like any type of work that you have to do with lots of people together and you have to do that regularly enough, it's bound to get messy. But like in artistic fields, there's just a different flavor to it. Like the mess just goes to another level, bitch. So, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll very much applies here, but not in a silly way, not in a glamorizing way, just in a very realistic and nuanced way. And it was so good. It was just so good. It's also given Fleetwood Mac fanfic vibes, and I very much mean that in a positive way. So the book is populated with incredibly well-written and complex characters who are varying shades of grey. They aren't necessarily good people. They have tons of flaws. They make tons of mistakes. And their relationships with one another are so well explored too, and so well written and so good. Basically, this is 1000% up my alley. But this is also the story of Billy and Daisy and Camilla, both individually, you know, as people, as individuals, as well as in relation to one another. Billy is the front man of the six, is the leader, you could say, and he's the guy who composes all of the music, and he composes everyone's parts in all of the songs, and he's also the guy who writes the lyrics. So, you know, he's a control freak, which is a thing throughout the book, a big thing. Daisy is a woman who's obsessed with music. She loves music, and she's been a part of the LA Sunset Strip music scene since she was very young as a groupie, which is less than ideal, to put it gently. Her parents were extremely neglectful, and their family has always been very wealthy too. So Daisy ended up in just these very awful situations where she was constantly being taken advantage of in more ways than one, and more times than one too. And Billy and Daisy both have their own histories with addiction. Billy, at the point where they meet, has been sober for a little while, while Daisy's drug abuse is just skyrocketing by the day. I think the way the book portrays addiction and explores addiction was done very well and very sensibly too. You know, I'm not by any means an anti-drug person. Drugs in and of themselves are morally neutral, and using drugs is morally neutral. But addiction is an illness. Like, there's no denying that addiction is a disease, and it destroys lives, both the lives of the people who have the illness and the lives of the people around them, you know. And it's just heartbreaking. And there's nothing morally wrong with addiction either. You know, addiction is, again, an illness. It's not a choice. It's not a lack of trying, you know. Just wanted to reiterate that drug use and drug abuse are two different things. Drug abuse is a problem, but the person with an addiction is not a problem. Does that make sense? I hope it made sense. And then we also have CAMILA, Billy's wife, pretty much honorary member of the band, and just loved by all, including me. She is incredibly compassionate and understanding. She's very loving, but don't get it twisted, because she stands up for herself and she goes after what she wants, and she takes no fucking shit from anyone. Like, I love her.
Listen to me. Hey,
Get off!
okay.
You two been covering for him this whole time, yeah? Fuck you! Fuck you! The fuck do you think you're doing, Billy? What the fuck is wrong with you?
Like, despite the fact that I have just used many words to describe these three characters, it's still just such an oversimplification of what each of them are, especially CAMILA. Like, she's so much more than that. You just have to read it, okay? This love triangle is formed between the three of them, and it is honestly one of my favorite love triangles I've ever read. It is so unique and well done, especially when it comes to the way that CAMILA and Daisy behave with each other, and just the lack of that traditional toxic female rivalry that you would expect to see in a story like this. Not that it would be unearned on CAMILA's part, because like, bitch, that's her husband. But still, you get what I'm saying. Like, CAMILA, she deserves the world. I loved many characters and many relationships in this book. Simone, who is clearly the best friend anyone in the world could ever have. Graham and Karen, who are the guitarist and the keyboardist in the band, and they have this kind of secret relationship with one another. Warren, who cracked me the fuck up the entire time, like a comedian, a whole clown. But Daisy, Billy, and CAMILA are always gonna be my favorites. They have my whole heart. I really fucking love them and understood them so deeply and connected with them. Is Billy Dunne often a piece of shit? Yes. Is Daisy Jones often a piece of shit? Also yes, that too. But they feel real and human, and through learning the backstories, the backgrounds, the histories, you come to understand why they are the people that they are, why they become that, and why they choose the things that they choose, and why they do the things that they do. And it all makes sense, and you understand them. You may not agree with them, you may not like them, but you understand them. And I think that's the thing every author should go for. A likable character isn't always a sympathetic one. So keep that in mind, authors. Billy and Daisy are twin flames. They have this deep connection, almost like a soulmate thing, but they are also oftentimes, a mirror of one another. And that ends up both pulling them together and pushing them apart. Like, it's a very love-hate thing going on. And CAMILA, God bless her, honestly. She's a better person than me. That's all I'm gonna say. And I gotta say, I cannot understand in any way, shape or form the level of hatred and vitriol the fans of this book have for CAMILA. Yoni Jesus. Something ain't right in your heart. Like, what the fuck? She did literally nothing wrong. Regardless of whether or not she fucked up your ship, which is also my ship, one of them at least. Regardless of whether or not you like her, she has done nothing wrong. Like, that is her husband, that is her family. What the fuck is going on? I don't get it. Anyway, I could talk on and on about this book, honestly, like an entire day at least. And I still don't think I was able to show you like just how much I loved it. Like, oh my god, this fucking book. I fucking love it. Another instant new favorite, another one that I need to reread as soon as possible, and another one that I would really fucking like to do an entire video solely dedicated to it, or maybe even more than one. Like, please wish me strength and like will and energy to actually put all of these plans, like turn all of these plans into reality, because I would so fucking love doing video essays like in general, but especially about these two books that I said that about in this video. My god, my words. Oh, how did I almost forget to talk about this? I read this book through audio, literally the best audiobook I've ever listened to in my entire life. It's because the writing style of this book lends itself so well to an audiobook, because it's all interviews. And the audiobook also has a full cast. So it's like you were actually listening to the interviews of these people. And it's amazing. Like every single actor, voice actor, did such an incredible job with it. Especially the one who did Daisy Jones. I can't remember her name. Oh my god. Like, I don't know what she looks like, but the way she acts and the way she talks, that's Daisy Jones for me. Like, that's Daisy Jones for me. She embodied that role. Like, she brought all of the charm and the... It's amazing. It's amazing. And also, like, it's incredible to hear the emotions in the voices of the characters as they give these interviews and tell those stories. Like, when they laugh a little, you hear the little laugh or the smile, or if they're sad, you hear like the voice cracking and all that. And it just feels like you're listening to a podcast or something like that. It feels so real. I don't know that I would like fucking love this book half as much as I do if it were in for the audiobook. I am not sure, honestly, but it feels super real. All of these people feel real. Like, there were times I would forget that Daisy Jones and the Six weren't like real people and a real band, and that those songs were real songs. Incredible. Incredible. Congrats, Taylor. You did amazing, sweetie. And I know what you're wondering. I have seen the show. I have many thoughts about it. Again, might make a video on it, might not. It's just a lot of thoughts, okay? And if it weren't clear before, I gave Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid 5 out of 5 stars, like, obviously. Okay, down to the last two books. First, Wishful Drinking by Carrie Fisher. I don't have anything to say about this book, to be quite honest with you. It was a book. It was definitely a book. I read it myself. This is a memoir by Carrie Fisher. It doesn't really have like a cohesive thread throughout the entire thing for me to actually be able to give you a summary or a synopsis or anything of the sort. Like, it doesn't tell you the story of her entire life. It's not like an autobiography. But also, the stories it tells kind of have nothing to do with one another. So it ends up just being kind of all over the place and a mess and just very disjointed. Like, the stories aren't of one specific moment of her life, or, you know, stories that follow kind of a certain theme that happened to her. No, it's just stories, random stories that happen in her life. Okay, it offers quite disconnected, is what I mean, which I guess makes sense considering what she says about the way her memory works after several years of addiction and a mood disorder and electroshock therapy. It kind of is all over the place inside her head. And the best thing about it is just getting to hear Carrie Fisher telling you little silly stories of her life, because the audiobook is narrated by her. So it feels like a friend is telling you those things, which is quite nice, I think. Full disclosure, I love Carrie Fisher, and her death was one of the few celebrity deaths that actually made me cry. So I just really liked the experience of listening to this audiobook, and I don't regret doing it at all. I just don't know if I would recommend it. Like, I don't know if it's a good book. I liked it. Like, I didn't even rate it. I wouldn't even know how to rate it or what to rate it. It's a funny one. It's an interesting one to talk about because of that. It was nothing much, I guess. It was funny at times, it was quick-witted, but it was also quite random and disjointed, as I said before. So, even Stevens. And now, finally, the last book that I read during those first 2 months of the year, Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Lots of names. Tongue twists. This is a post-apocalyptic science fiction book, I think. Maybe speculative fiction. Maybe even literary fiction. I'm honestly not quite sure what is the right genre of this book. But it's post-apocalyptic. Yeah, it's a post-apocalyptic world, and the story goes back and forth between 2 timelines, like 2 periods of time. The first one starts during a production of King Lear, where the main actor dies on stage suddenly, quite abruptly, and we soon find out that what killed him was the apocalyptic event in question in this book, which is a pandemic. Yay!
I'm so happy. I'm the happiest. I'm happy.
And the other time period is like 15 years or so in the future, I think, when things are still a lot shittier than they were before the pandemic, but they are considerably less shitty than when the entire thing started. Like, everything is a lot more stable than it was at the start of this pandemic, this apocalypse, if that makes sense. And it's in this timeline that we follow this nomadic theatre company that goes through several settlements in this new world in order to perform Shakespeare to people. This was just so beautiful and deeply touching to me in a way that I almost can't describe. Honestly, in a way that I almost can't even understand, to be honest. Yeah, and I was talking to a friend of mine as I read it, because they are obsessed with the TV show adaptation of this book. Nico is my friend. And this is how the conversation went. So first they asked me if the book was sad, to which I replied, it's more melancholy than sad. It's like beautiful sad. Sometimes there's moments where I literally have to pause the audiobook in order to recollect myself. Quotes and sentences and moments that I can't even explain the emotions that they make me feel, like wistful, and it gives you a sliver of hope in people/humanity, but at the same time not. And all the connections between the characters and things are becoming more and more clear, and it's just so bunch of exclamation marks. To which they replied by describing it much more aptly than me and much more concisely by saying, it's like being human is pain and intense love, everything at the same time, and it is worth it. Duh. We follow a bunch of characters who are all connected in some way, usually in a very small way, almost coincidental, but not really. And it's just so beautiful and so well done. It's perfect. It's about perseverance and resilience and just the triumph of the human spirit, if you will. It's about the stories we tell and our love for them, and it's about the power and permanence of art, how it keeps living on even when all of us are not here anymore. And it's about how it keeps us going and how it helps shape us and inspire us. It's about the many different forms that it gets depending on who is witnessing and experiencing it. It's about how just surviving isn't enough. You actually need to live. So it is dark, yes, but it's also incredibly and surprisingly hopeful, and it's just a very human story. Like, just saying this book is about a traveling theatre company who performs Shakespeare plays in a post-apocalyptic world doesn't do this book justice at all. It's such an oversimplification. And it's low-key misleading too, now that I think about it. Just like this makes it feel like the tone of the book is completely different. I don't know. And all the characters and stories that we follow in both timelines are somehow connected to that actor who dies on stage at the beginning of the book. Either they were close to him or they just crossed paths with him at some point, or they were connected to someone who was connected to him, and so on and so forth. But it's done in such an intricate way. It is beautiful and interesting and just incredible. The writing was superb. There was some great use of imagery and symbolism. And it was very effective to me personally in the way it described like certain moments and emotions. How can I describe this? Like, you know when you read something and it hits you so deep inside and you have this surge of emotion because it's just so beautiful, but also it's relatable. Even if you've never been in that exact situation, like, you were clearly feeling what you were supposed to be feeling while reading it, because it was just written so smartly and aptly. It was written so well and described like just the right way for you to feel that exact same thing. Like, I don't know if any of that makes sense. I think I was just rambling. This world and these small civilizations that the author created are very realistic in how chaotic they are, and in how different people find order in their chaos in very different ways, and how all of these civilizations develop differently and at a different pace from each other. And the way that people in the post-apocalyptic timeline, especially the ones who were born after the pandemic had already started, the way these people talk about the pre-pandemic world and the things they had, you know, things that are just normal things for us and that we take for granted, was just incredibly fascinating too. Anyway, I've been rambling on for too long. Obviously, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I love this book with my whole entire heart, and it spoke to me in a way very few books ever did before. So yeah, as I said before, started my reading year off with the right foot. Feels so good. I've been in a huge audiobook kick. All of the books that I've read so far this year, except for one, all of them were audiobooks, which is funny because I'm not usually an audiobook person. I feel like I personally pay more attention and I'm more thorough in my reading if I'm reading it with my eyes, which I know is not true for everyone. So it's interesting. I think that because last semester I was writing my thesis and I basically couldn't do anything outside of that, so I didn't read much and I didn't do much. When I kind of started trying to get back into reading after I finished writing it, it was easier for me to just, put on an audiobook. It's been an interesting journey, and my reading year has been doing great so far. Anyway, I'm not gonna make any promises, but I do have lots of ideas and plans for videos in this channel this year. The only thing I don't have is energy and will, So wish me good luck, wish me strength, energy, so that I can actually make those ideas become a reality. Thanks to everyone who stuck around despite the fact that I only posted 3 videos last year. Thanks to all the new subscribers who came from wherever you did. Let me know in the comments down below if you want how you found out about my channel and how you got here. I had a kind of a surge in subscribers a couple of times during the period where I wasn't posting anything, so I'd be quite interested in finding that out. And yeah, wish me luck. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment, like and subscribe if you feel like it. And as always, I'll see you around, hopefully.